The swinging doors of Hartwell's general store burst open with such force that the bell above nearly flew off its hinge, and Magdalena Torres stood frozen on the threshold as every eye in the establishment turned to stare at the young woman with olive skin and dark hair pinned beneath a simple cotton bonnet. She had walked 3 miles from the boarding house on the edge of Silver Ridge, Montana territory, in the scorching July heat of 1883, clutching the last $2 she owned in her calloused palm, hoping to buy enough flour and beans to last her through the week, while she searched desperately for any kind of work that might keep her from starvation. The store smelled of leather and tobacco, of pickled goods and fresh bread, and Magdalena's stomach twisted with hunger as she approached the counter where a portly man with mutton chop whiskers and cold gray eyes watched her advance with obvious displeasure. She had rehearsed what she would say, practicing the English words carefully, because even after 3 years in America, her Spanish accent remained thick and unmistakable, a constant reminder that she did not belong in this dusty Montana town where suspicion hung heavier than the summer heat. "Good morning, sir," she began, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I would like to purchase 1 pound of flour and 1 pound of beans, please." The shopkeeper, Silas Hartwell, crossed his arms over his broad chest and looked her up and down with undisguised contempt. "We don't serve foreigners here," he said flatly, his voice carrying through the store, where at least a dozen other customers had stopped their shopping to witness the confrontation. "Especially not ones who can barely speak proper English." Heat flooded Magdalena's cheeks, a mixture of shame and rising anger that made her grip tighten on the coins in her hand. "My money is good," she said, lifting her chin with what dignity she could muster. "I am asking only to buy food, nothing more." "I said no," Hartwell repeated, his voice growing louder. "You people come here taking jobs from decent Americans, bringing your strange ways and your jabber, and then you expect us to serve you like you're one of us? The door's behind you. Use it." Magdalena felt the sting of tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these strangers who looked at her as though she were something less than human. She had fled Mexico after her father died, and her mother succumbed to fever, had crossed the border with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's silver rosary around her neck, had survived things that would have broken lesser souls, and she would not break now before this cruel man and his hateful words. "I am sorry you feel this way," she managed, her accent seeming to thicken with emotion despite her best efforts. "I will take my business elsewhere." "Good luck with that," Hartwell sneered. "Every decent shopkeeper in Silver Ridge knows to turn away your kind. Maybe if you people stayed where you belonged, we wouldn't have these problems." The other customers murmured their agreement, and Magdalena turned toward the door, her vision blurring with unshed tears, her empty stomach a painful reminder of just how desperate her situation had become. She had nearly reached the exit when a deep voice rang out from the back of the store, cutting through the murmurs like a knife through butter. "Seems to me her money's just as green as anyone else's." Every head turned toward the speaker, a tall man who had been examining a display of riding equipment in the far corner. He straightened to his full height, which Magdalena estimated must be well over 6 feet, and moved toward the counter with the easy, confident stride of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He wore dusty trail clothes, leather chaps over worn denim, a dark shirt open at the collar, and a black Stetson that shadowed a face of sharp angles and startling blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Magdalena recognized him immediately, though they had never spoken. Everyone in Silver Ridge knew Cole Brennan, the rancher who owned the sprawling Double B Ranch 10 miles north of town, a man who had built his fortune through hard work and shrewd business decisions, who employed more men than any other rancher in the territory, and who commanded respect wherever he went through sheer force of will and unwavering integrity. "This doesn't concern you, Brennan," Hartwell said, but there was a new note of uncertainty in his voice. "I got a right to refuse service to anyone I please." "That's true enough," Cole agreed, stopping beside Magdalena, so close she could smell leather and sage and something clean like mountain air. "But it makes a man wonder what kind of establishment you're running here when you turn away paying customers for no good reason other than where they were born or how they talk." "She's Mexican," Hartwell sputtered, as though this explained everything. "You know how these people are, Brennan. Let one in, and pretty soon the whole place is overrun." Cole's jaw tightened, and Magdalena saw a flash of something dangerous in those blue eyes before he brought it under control. Miss Torres here is a human being who deserves to be treated with basic decency and respect, he said quietly, but there was steel beneath the soft words. She came in to buy supplies with her own hard-earned money, and you insulted her and threw her out. That doesn't sit right with me. How do you know her name? Hartwell demanded suspiciously. I make it my business to know the people in this town, Cole replied. Miss Torres has been living at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house for the past month, working odd jobs where she can find them, never causing trouble, always paying her way. She's got more integrity in her little finger than some folks I could name who were born and raised here. Magdalena stared at this man who somehow knew details about her life, who was defending her to a room full of hostile strangers, and she felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight band of fear and loneliness that had constricted her breathing for so long. Well, I still don't have to serve her, Hartwell said stubbornly. This is my store, and I'll run it how I see fit. Fair enough, Cole said with a shrug that seemed almost casual. How much would you take for it? The question hung in the air like smoke, and Magdalena watched confusion spread across Hartwell's fleshy face. What? Your store, Cole clarified, pulling out a leather wallet from his back pocket. How much would you take to sell it to me right here, right now? Hartwell's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. You can't be serious. I'm always serious when it comes to business, Cole assured him. You've been talking for years about retiring, moving to San Francisco to live with your daughter. Here's your chance. Name your price. The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed with greed and calculation. $15,000, he said finally, clearly expecting Cole to balk at the inflated price. Cash money, not banknotes. Done, Cole said without hesitation, and began counting out bills onto the counter in neat stacks. I'll need a bill of sale, of course, signed and witnessed. I'm sure these good folks would be happy to serve as witnesses to our transaction. Magdalena watched in stunned disbelief as Cole Brennan, who she had never exchanged more than a nod with on the street, calmly purchased an entire general store just to prove a point about basic human decency. The other customers whispered among themselves, some scandalized, others clearly amused by the turn of events, while Hartwell's face cycled through various shades of red and purple as he realized he had been outmaneuvered. You're crazy, Brennan, the former shopkeeper muttered, but he was already reaching for paper and pen to draw up the bill of sale. Spending all that money just to make some kind of statement about a Mexican girl. The statement's already been made, Cole replied mildly. Now we're just concluding our business transaction. I trust you'll have your personal belongings cleared out by the end of the day. Within 20 minutes, the deed was done, witnessed and signed, and Silas Hartwell stormed out of what was no longer his store with his personal effects stuffed into a carpet bag, leaving behind a room full of shocked customers and one very bewildered young woman who still could not quite believe what had just transpired. Cole turned to Magdalena with a slight smile that softened the hard planes of his face. Now then, Miss Torres, I believe you wanted to purchase some flour and beans. She found her voice with difficulty. Mr. Brennan, I do not understand. Why would you do such a thing? You spent so much money because of me. Not because of you, he corrected gently. Because it was the right thing to do. Hartwell's been running this place with meanness and prejudice for too long, turning away anyone he decided wasn't good enough. That's not how business should be conducted, and it's not how people should be treated. He moved behind the counter with easy familiarity, surveying the shelves and supplies. Now, about those provisions you needed. I have only $2, Magdalena admitted, her pride warring with her desperation. It is not much. It's enough, Cole assured her, and began measuring out flour and beans with competent hands that suggested he was no stranger to practical work. He added a small sack of coffee, some salt pork, and a jar of preserves before she could protest. Consider the extra a welcome gift to my first customer in my new establishment. I cannot accept charity, Magdalena said firmly, even as her stomach growled at the sight of so much food. Cole met her eyes across the counter, and she was struck by the warmth and understanding she found there. It's not charity. Truth is, Miss Torres, I'm going to need someone to run this place for me. I've got a ranch to manage, and I can't be in town every day looking after a general store. You strike me as someone who's honest, hardworking, and smart enough to learn the business quickly. Would you be interested in the position? Magdalena's heart began to pound so hard, she was certain he must hear it. You are offering me a job? To work here? Managing the store? Cole clarified. Ordering inventory, keeping the books, serving customers, the whole operation. It's a big responsibility, but I think you can handle it. Pay would be $30 a month plus room and board upstairs. There's a small apartment on the second floor that's been empty for years, needs some fixing up, but it would be yours rent-free as part of your wages. It was more money than Magdalena had dreamed of earning, more security than she had known since her parents died, and she felt dizzy with the sudden reversal of fortune. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you trust me with something so valuable? You do not know me." "I know enough," Cole said quietly. "I know you walked 3 miles in the heat just to buy basic supplies with the last money you had. I know you've been working yourself to exhaustion taking in laundry and mending for pennies, trying to save enough to maybe start some kind of life here. I know you hold your head high, even when people treat you badly, and you don't let meanness make you mean in return. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." He paused, then added with disarming honesty. "And I know that 3 years ago, you helped Mrs. Henderson when she fell and broke her hip, stayed with her through the night even though you barely knew her, sent for the doctor with your own money. She told me about it, said you were the kindest person she'd ever met." Tears did fall then, sliding down Magdalena's cheeks unchecked, but they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than shame. "I do not know what to say, Mr. Brennan. Say you'll take the job," Cole suggested with another of those rare smiles that transformed his entire face. "And maybe call me Cole. If we're going to be business partners, we should probably skip the formalities." "Cole," she repeated, tasting the name. "I am Magdalena, but most people call me Maggie." "Maggie," he said, and somehow her name sounded different in his deep voice, something precious and worthwhile. "Do we have a deal?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and nodded, feeling the first stirring of something that might eventually become hope. Yes, we have a deal." The remaining customers had drifted out during their conversation, and now they were alone in the store that still smelled of Hartwell's cheap cigars and bitterness. Cole came around the counter and extended his hand, and when Maggie placed her smaller hand in his, she felt the calluses that marked him as a man who did not shy away from hard work, felt the warmth and strength in his grip, and something sparked between them, a connection that went beyond simple business arrangement or charitable impulse. "When would you like me to start?" she asked, reluctant to break the contact but knowing she must. "How about right now?" Cole suggested, finally releasing her hand. "I'll help you get familiar with the inventory and the bookkeeping system, such as it is. Fair warning, Hartwell was not exactly meticulous with his records, so we've got our work cut out for us." They spent the rest of the afternoon going through shelves and stock rooms, and Maggie discovered that Cole Brennan was not at all what she had expected from a wealthy rancher who could casually spend $15,000 on a whim. He was patient with her questions, respectful of her opinions, and genuinely interested in her ideas for how to improve the store's organization and offerings. "The layout makes no sense," she observed, studying the cluttered shelves where canned goods mingled with hardware and dry goods were scattered across 3 different areas. "Customers cannot find what they need easily. Everything should be grouped together by type, and the most common items should be within easy reach." "You're absolutely right," Cole agreed, looking around with new eyes. "I never thought about it, but I've wasted plenty of time hunting for things in here. What else would you change?" Emboldened by his encouragement, Maggie continued. "The prices are not clearly marked on many items. People should be able to see what things cost without having to ask, and there should be a section for fresh produce when it is available. People need vegetables and fruit, not just canned goods and dried beans. Perhaps you could arrange with local farmers to sell their extra harvest here." Cole nodded slowly, a look of genuine respect growing in his eyes. "You've got a good head for business, Maggie. Those are all excellent suggestions. I'll leave the implementation up to you, within reason. If you need to hire help for the heavy reorganizing, let me know." As the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Cole showed Maggie the apartment upstairs. It was dusty and full of cobwebs, the furniture covered in sheets, but she could see the potential in the spacious room with its large windows overlooking the main street, the small but functional kitchen area, the separate bedroom with an actual bed frame and mattress. "It needs work," Cole admitted, looking around with a critical eye. "Probably needs a good cleaning, some fresh paint, new curtains at the very least." "It is wonderful," Maggie breathed, touching the windowsill with reverent fingers. After months of sharing a tiny room with two other women at the boarding house, the idea of having a space entirely her own seemed almost too good to be true. "I can clean it myself. I do not need anything fancy." "Nevertheless, take tomorrow to get settled," Cole said. "I'll have some of my ranch hands bring over cleaning supplies and anything else you need. The store can stay closed one more day while you make the place livable. We'll have a grand reopening the day after. Let everyone know there's new management." "What if people will not shop here because of me?" Maggie asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in the back of her mind. "What if they hate having a Mexican woman running the store?" Cole's expression hardened. "Then they can take their business elsewhere, and they'll have to travel 20 miles to the next town to do their shopping. I'm not running a business based on bigotry and hatred. Anyone who can't treat you with respect isn't welcome here." He softened slightly, adding, "But I think you'll be surprised. Most folks in Silver Ridge are decent people. Hartwell was an unpleasant man who made everyone miserable, customers and competitors alike. A lot of people will be happy to see new management, and once they see how well you run the place, any objections will fade away." Maggie wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in this vision of a future where she could walk down the street without facing suspicion and scorn, but 3 years of harsh experience had taught her to be cautious with hope. Still, looking at Cole's honest face and remembering his fierce defense of her that morning, she thought that perhaps, just perhaps, things might be different this time. Cole left as twilight descended over Silver Ridge, promising to return the next morning with supplies and assistance, and Maggie stood in the doorway of the store that was now her workplace and her home, watching him walk to where his horse was tethered. He moved with the unconscious grace of a man completely comfortable in his own skin, and she found herself admiring the breadth of his shoulders and the easy confidence in his stride before catching herself and looking away with heated cheeks. He was her employer now, nothing more, and she would be foolish to let her thoughts wander in dangerous directions. Men like Cole Brennan did not fall in love with poor immigrant women with nothing to offer but hard work and determination. He had helped her out of basic decency and perhaps a sense of justice, but that did not mean he saw her as anything other than an employee and a business investment. Still, as she climbed the stairs to her new apartment and began pulling sheets off furniture by lamplight, Maggie could not quite suppress the smile that kept tugging at her lips, or the warmth that bloomed in her chest when she remembered the way Cole had said her name, the strength of his hand holding hers, the protective fury in his eyes when Hartwell had insulted her. She fell asleep that night on a dusty but comfortable mattress, full of the food Cole had given her, surrounded by the promise of a better future. And for the first time in 3 long years, Magdalena Torres allowed herself to dream of something more than mere survival. True to his word, Cole arrived the next morning with a wagon full of supplies and 2 ranch hands who helped carry up buckets, mops, brooms, fresh linens, and even some cheerful yellow fabric for curtains. He had also brought a breakfast basket from his ranch cook, full of fresh biscuits, eggs, bacon, and coffee that made Maggie's eyes sting with grateful tears. "Maria insisted," Cole explained, referring to his cook. "She said no one should start a new position on an empty stomach. There's enough for several meals, so don't feel like you have to eat it all at once." Maggie invited him to share the meal, and they sat at the small table in her apartment, eating in comfortable silence broken occasionally by practical discussion of store business. She learned that Cole's ranch supplied beef to 3 different territories, that he employed 30 men year-round and double that during roundup season, that he had built his operation from nothing over the past 8 years through backbreaking work and smart management. "My father was a drifter who drank himself to death when I was 15, Cole said, his voice matter of fact, but his eyes reflecting old pain. "My mother died giving birth to me. I was raised by my uncle, who taught me ranching, but also taught me the value of treating people fairly, regardless of where they came from or what they looked like. When he died and left me a small piece of land and some seed money, I decided to build something that would make him proud, something based on hard work and integrity, not cruelty or exploitation." "He would be very proud," Maggie said softly. "What you did yesterday buying the store, it was not just about business, was it?" Cole met her eyes across the table. "No," he admitted. "It was about not standing by while someone was being treated badly just because I found it easier to look away. I've seen too much meanness in this world, Maggie. Too many people who use their power or their position to make others feel small. I decided a long time ago that I wouldn't be that kind of man, and I wouldn't tolerate it from others if I had the power to stop it. You are a good man, Cole Brennan, Maggie said, and meant it with her whole heart. I'm just a man trying to do right, Cole replied, looking uncomfortable with the praise. Speaking of which, I should let you get to work here. You've got a lot of cleaning ahead of you. I'll check back this evening, see how you are settling in. He was true to his word, returning as the sun set with dinner from the restaurant and a cheerful update about how word of the store's change in ownership was spreading through town. Some people were skeptical, he admitted, but many were curious and even pleased to hear that Silas Hartwell would no longer be insulting customers and running his business with an iron fist and a mean spirit. This pattern continued for the next several days. Cole would stop by in the morning with breakfast, check on Maggie's progress, answer her questions about suppliers and accounts, and then return in the evening with dinner and conversation. They fell into an easy rhythm that felt natural and right, and Maggie found herself looking forward to these visits with an anticipation that had nothing to do with the excellent meals he brought and everything to do with the pleasure of his company. Cole was unlike any man she had ever known. He listened when she spoke, really listened, giving her opinions weight and consideration. He laughed at her observations about the strange items she found in the storeroom, shared stories about his ranch and the colorful characters who worked there, and gradually revealed more about his own past and dreams for the future. I want to build something that lasts, he told her one evening as they sat on the stairs outside the store, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Not just a successful ranch, but a real community where people look out for each other, where hard work is rewarded and everyone gets a fair chance regardless of where they started. Maybe that is naive, but it is what I want. It is not naive, Maggie assured him. It is good. The world needs more people who want to build instead of just taking what they can get. She paused, then added quietly, "That is what my father always said. He was a craftsman, made beautiful furniture, and he believed that what a man built with his hands was a reflection of his soul. He would have liked you, I think." "I wish I could have met him," Cole said sincerely. "What brought you here, Maggie? To Montana, I mean. It is a long way from Mexico." So she told him, haltingly at first, and then with growing confidence about her parents' deaths, about having no other family and no way to survive in the village where she had grown up, about the dangerous journey north with a family who had agreed to let her travel with them in exchange for helping care for their children. She told him about the fear and loneliness of those first months in a strange country where she barely spoke the language, about the constant struggle to find work and keep herself fed and sheltered, about the casual cruelty and suspicion she faced nearly everywhere she went. "I thought about going back so many times," she admitted, "but there was nothing to go back to. At least here, there was possibility. Even if it was hard, even if people were unkind, I could work and earn money and maybe eventually have some kind of life. I could not do that in my village. There were no opportunities for a woman alone with no family." Cole reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar over the past days but still sent warmth flooding through her. "I am glad you stayed," he said quietly, "and I am sorry it was so hard. It should not have been that way. But if it had been easy, I would not have been at the general store that day," Maggie pointed out with a small smile. "I would not have met you. Perhaps everything happens for a reason." "Perhaps it does," Cole agreed, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch and her heart race with something that felt dangerously like hope. The grand reopening of the general store happened on a bright Saturday morning, and Maggie stood behind the counter in a new dress that Cole had insisted on buying for her hair neatly arranged, her hands trembling slightly with nervousness as the first customers began to file in. Some came out of simple curiosity, wanting to see what changes the new management had made. Others came because they were genuinely pleased to be free of Hartwell's unpleasant presence. A few came with skepticism written plainly on their faces, ready to find fault with the foreign woman who dared to run a business in their town. But Maggie had spent days preparing for this moment. The store was immaculately clean and carefully organized. Every item was clearly priced and easy to find. She had arranged fresh flowers in jars on the counter and filled the front window with an attractive display of goods. The apartment upstairs smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings, and she herself was calm and professional, greeting each customer with courtesy and patience. Cole stood nearby, ostensibly examining some harness equipment, but really there to offer silent support, and Maggie drew strength from his presence as she measured out sugar and salt, wrapped packages in brown paper and string, made change from the cash box with steady hands. Mrs. Henderson was among the first customers, pulling Maggie into a fierce hug and whispering her congratulations. "I always knew you would land on your feet, dear girl," the older woman said warmly. "And I knew Cole Brennan was a good man. You two make a fine team." Others followed, some offering genuine warmth, others maintaining cool distance but still conducting their business with basic politeness. By noon, Maggie had served nearly 24 customers, and the cash box held more money than she had expected. Cole had been right about people being glad for the change in ownership, and even those who remained skeptical seemed willing to give her a chance based on the quality of her service and the improvements to the store itself. One woman, elegant in a green traveling suit despite the dust of Silver Ridge, spent considerable time examining the fabric selection and discussing the possibility of special orders with Maggie. "I'm Elizabeth Thornton," she introduced herself. "My husband owns the bank. I must say, this is a vast improvement over Hartwell's slovenly management. That man could never keep proper inventory, and his attitude was simply insufferable. I'm pleased to see someone competent taking over." "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton," Maggie replied, careful with her pronunciation. "I hope to serve the community well." "I'm sure you will," Elizabeth said warmly, and when she left, she made a point of telling the people gathered outside that the new management was excellent and everyone should support the store. As the day wore on and success seemed assured, Maggie felt the tight knot of anxiety in her chest gradually loosen. She was going to be all right. More than all right. She was going to thrive. She had a good job, a safe home, enough to eat, and for the first time since leaving Mexico, she had something that felt almost like security. When the last customer finally left and Maggie turned the sign on the door to closed, she sagged against the counter with exhaustion and relief. Cole, who had remained throughout the long day, came to stand beside her with a grin that lit up his whole face. "You were magnificent," he said simply. "I knew you would be, but seeing it was something else. You are going to make this place the most successful store in the territory." "I could not have done it without you," Maggie protested, but Cole shook his head. "All I did was give you an opportunity. Everything else, the hard work, the preparation, the grace under pressure, that was all you, Maggie. You should be proud." She was proud, she realized. For the first time in a very long time, she felt proud of herself, of what she had accomplished, of the strength it had taken to survive and keep going even when everything seemed hopeless. And looking at Cole, at this man who had changed her entire life with one impulsive act of decency, she felt something else too, something warm and frightening and wonderful that she was not quite ready to name. "Let me take you to dinner to celebrate," Cole suggested. "A proper dinner at the restaurant, not just food brought to your apartment. You deserve a night out after today's success." Maggie hesitated, aware that being seen at dinner with Cole would cause talk, would link their names together in the minds of the townspeople. But she found she did not care about gossip or speculation. She wanted to spend the evening with him, wanted to celebrate this new chapter in her life in his company, wanted to bask a little longer in the warmth of his approval and the comfort of his presence. "I would like that very much," she said softly. The restaurant was surprisingly crowded for a Saturday evening, and every eye in the place turned to watch as Cole and Maggie entered together. She held her head high and let Cole guide her to a corner table, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back in a gesture that felt both protective and proprietary. They ordered steaks and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, and pie for dessert, and they talked about everything and nothing, while the other diners whispered and speculated. Cole seemed oblivious to the attention, focused entirely on Maggie, asking her about her plans for the store, sharing his own ideas for expansion and improvement, making her laugh with stories about stubborn cattle and temperamental horses. It was the best evening Maggie could remember having since before her parents died, and when they finally left the restaurant well after dark, she felt drunk on happiness and good food and the intoxicating pleasure of Cole's undivided attention. He walked her back to the store, and they stood together in the shadowed doorway, neither quite ready for the evening to end. The night air was cool and fresh after the heat of the day, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains and the distant sound of piano music from one of the saloons down the street. "Thank you," Maggie said, looking up at Cole's face, barely visible in the darkness. "For everything. For defending me, for giving me this chance, for believing in me when no one else would. I do not know how I will ever repay you. "You don't need to repay me," Cole said, and his voice had gone rough and low. "Maggie, I want you to know that helping you was not entirely selfless. I did it because I could not stand by and watch you be mistreated, but I also did it because I have been trying to work up the courage to talk to you for weeks, and Hartwell's cruelty gave me the excuse I needed." Maggie's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I have noticed you for a long time," Cole admitted. "Noticed your kindness and your courage, the way you hold yourself with dignity no matter how people treat you. I have wanted to know you, to talk to you, but I could not figure out how to approach you without seeming forward or making you uncomfortable. When I saw what was happening at the store, I knew I had to do something. Maybe I went overboard buying the whole place, but I do not regret it. Not for a second." "Cole," Maggie whispered, her heart hammering so hard she could barely hear her own voice over its thunder. "I do not know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Cole assured her. "I just wanted you to know the truth. I care about you, Maggie, more than I probably should, given that I'm your employer now, and that complicates things. But I couldn't let tonight end without telling you how I feel." Maggie took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I care about you too," she confessed. "These past days spending time with you, getting to know you, it has been the happiest I have been in years. I thought it was just gratitude, just being thankful for everything you have done. But it is more than that. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way no one else ever has. I think I am falling in love with you, Cole Brennan, and it terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" Cole asked gently, reaching out to cup her cheek with his calloused hand. "Because I have nothing to offer you," Maggie said, her voice breaking. "I am poor and foreign and have no family or connections. You could have anyone, any woman in this territory, someone from a good family with money and education and everything I lack. Why would you want someone like me?" "Because you are brave and kind and smart," Cole said fiercely. "Because you survived things that would have destroyed most people, and you did it with grace and dignity. Because when I look at you, I see someone strong and beautiful and real, not some pampered debutante who has never known hardship or struggle. I want you, Maggie, not despite where you come from or what you have been through, but because of it. Because it made you into the remarkable woman standing in front of me right now." And then he kissed her, soft and sweet and tentative, and Maggie felt like her heart might burst from the joy of it. She kissed him back with all the longing and hope she had been suppressing, rising up on her toes to wrap her arms around his neck, letting herself believe for the first time that this might be real, that this amazing man might truly want her the way she was discovering she wanted him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers and smiled. "So, I guess we are courting now," he said, "if that is what you want." "It is what I want more than anything," Maggie confirmed, and kissed him again, just because she could. Over the following weeks, Silver Ridge watched with interest as the relationship between Cole Brennan and Maggie Torres blossomed into something beautiful and unmistakable. He came to the store every day, usually twice, always with some excuse about needing supplies or checking on the business, but really just wanting to spend time with her. She began visiting the Double B Ranch on Sundays, her one day off, and Cole showed her around his property with obvious pride, introducing her to his ranch hands and his horses, sharing his dreams for expansion and improvement. The men who worked for Cole treated Maggie with immediate respect and friendliness, partly because they were decent men who judged people by their character rather than their origins, but mostly because they could see how much their boss cared for this quiet woman with the ready smile and gentle manner. Maria, the cook, adopted Maggie as a surrogate daughter within days, teaching her to ride and sharing family recipes and dispensing blunt advice about men and love and the importance of standing up for oneself. "Cole is a good man, but he can be stubborn," Maria warned, stirring a huge pot of stew in the ranch kitchen while Maggie helped chop vegetables. "He works too hard, forgets to eat, pushes himself too much. He needs someone who will take care of him, but also tell him when he is being foolish. I think you can do that." "I do not want to seem like I am trying to change him," Maggie protested. "That is different from caring for someone and wanting them to take care of themselves," Maria replied. "Love means looking out for each other, speaking truth even when it is uncomfortable. You will figure it out." Back in town, Maggie's competent management of the general store was winning over even the most skeptical residents. She had reorganized the inventory, negotiated better prices with suppliers, added new product lines that people actually wanted, and maintained meticulous records that made ordering and restocking far more efficient than under Hartwell's chaotic system. Profits were up significantly in just the first month, and Cole made sure everyone knew that this success was entirely due to Maggie's hard work and business acumen. Not everyone was pleased, of course. There remained a core of people who resented Maggie's presence and success, who muttered darkly about foreigners taking over their town and corrupting their values. These folks took their business to the next town when possible, and Maggie tried not to let their prejudice hurt her, though it sometimes still did. One afternoon in late August, a group of 3 men entered the store just before closing time. Maggie recognized them as troublemakers who spent most of their time drinking and causing problems, and her stomach tightened with apprehension as they spread out through the store, handling merchandise roughly and making loud comments clearly intended to intimidate her. "Heard a Mexican is running this place now," one of them said loudly to his companions. "Wonder if she even knows how to count proper, or if she's been cheating folks with bad arithmetic." "I keep accurate records," Maggie said calmly, though her heart was pounding. "If you have business here, I am happy to serve you. Otherwise, I am closing soon." "Otherwise, I am closing soon," one of them mimicked in an exaggerated accent, and the others laughed. "Listen to that. Sounds like she's got a mouthful of beans. How'd someone like you end up running a store anyway? Must have been on your back doing favors for Brennan." Red-hot anger flared through Maggie, burning away the fear. "Get out," she said, her voice low and hard. "Right now, you are not welcome here." "You can't throw us out," the ringleader said, moving toward the counter in a way that felt threatening. "This is a public establishment. We got rights. And I have the right to refuse service to anyone being disrespectful," Maggie countered, reaching under the counter where Cole had insisted she keep a loaded shotgun. She did not draw it, but she let her hand rest on the stock in clear warning. "I will ask you one more time to leave peacefully. If you do not, I will defend myself and my property, and then I will have the sheriff arrest you for harassment and trespassing." The 3 men exchanged glances, clearly not having expected such a firm response. After a tense moment, the ringleader spat on the floor and headed for the door. "This ain't over," he threatened. "Brennan can't protect you forever." They left in a cloud of belligerence, and Maggie stood behind the counter, shaking with reaction, until Mrs. Henderson rushed in from across the street, where she had apparently witnessed the entire confrontation through the front window. "Oh, my dear, are you all right?" the older woman fussed. "I saw those awful men come in, and I was about to send my husband for the sheriff. You were so brave." "I was terrified," Maggie admitted, sinking onto the stool behind the counter. "But I could not let them think they could bully me. If I had shown weakness, it would only have gotten worse." "You did exactly right," Mrs. Henderson assured her. "Those men are cowards and troublemakers, and everyone knows it. No one will blame you for standing up to them. Still, perhaps we should tell Cole what happened, just so he is aware." Maggie agreed, and when Cole arrived that evening as usual, she recounted the confrontation. His face went dark with fury, and she saw his hands clench into fists before he consciously relaxed them. "Tell me who they were," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Cole, no," Maggie said, touching his arm. "I do not want you to do anything that will cause more trouble. I handled it. They left, and it is over." "It's not over if they're making threats," Cole argued. "Those men need to understand there are consequences for harassing you. And if you confront them, you will only convince people that I need a man to fight my battles," Maggie pointed out, "that I am weak and cannot take care of myself. I do not want that, Cole. I want to build respect in this community, and I cannot do that if you rush to my defense every time someone is unkind." Cole looked torn between admiration for her strength and frustration at being unable to protect her. Finally, he sighed and pulled her into his arms. "You are the strongest person I know," he murmured into her hair. "But that does not mean you have to face everything alone. We are partners, Maggie, in business and in life. Let me help carry some of the weight." "I will," she promised, relaxing into his embrace. "But sometimes helping means trusting me to handle things my own way. Can you do that?" "I can try," Cole said. "But I'm also going to have a quiet word with the sheriff. Make sure he knows to keep an eye out for trouble. That's not fighting your battles for you. That's just being sensible about security." They compromised on having one of Cole's ranch hands, a cheerful young man named Tommy who was looking for extra work, help out at the store during busy times, and particularly in the early morning and late evening when Maggie was alone. Tommy's presence was enough to discourage further harassment, without being so obvious as to suggest Maggie could not handle herself, and the arrangement worked well for everyone. As summer faded into autumn and the aspens in the mountains turned gold and amber, Cole and Maggie's relationship deepened into something neither of them had expected, but both treasured. They stole moments together whenever possible, walking along the creek at sunset, sharing meals in the apartment above the store, talking for hours about their hopes and dreams and fears. Cole told her about the loneliness of his childhood, raised by an uncle who loved him but could not fill the void left by absent parents. He talked about the years of backbreaking work building his ranch, the setbacks and failures and near disasters that had almost destroyed him before success finally came. He shared his fear that he was not good enough, that everything he had built could be taken away at any moment, that he would end up alone and forgotten like his drifter father. Maggie told him about her mother's beautiful singing voice and her father's skilled hands, about growing up in a small village where everyone knew everyone, and life followed the same patterns it had for generations. She talked about the terror of leaving everything familiar behind, of arriving in a country where she could barely communicate, and where people looked at her with suspicion and distaste. She shared her own fears that she would always be an outsider, that she would never truly belong anywhere, that the happiness she had found with Cole was too fragile to last. "You belong here," Cole insisted, taking her face between his hands. "With me, in this town, in this life we are building together. I know people have made you feel unwelcome, but that is changing. They are seeing what I saw from the beginning, that you are remarkable and valuable and exactly where you were supposed to be." "I want to believe that," Maggie whispered. "I want to believe we can have a real future together." "We can," Cole promised. "We will. I love you, Maggie Torres. I think I started loving you the first time I saw you walk into that store with your head held high and determination in every line of your body. I love your strength and your kindness, your intelligence and your courage. I love the way you laugh and the way you think and the way you make me want to be a better man. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you every single day." Maggie felt tears streaming down her face as she absorbed his words, the absolute sincerity in his voice, the love shining in his eyes. "I love you too," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I did not think I could ever feel this way, ever trust someone enough to let them see all of me. But you make me brave, Cole. You make me believe that anything is possible." They kissed as the autumn sun set behind the mountains, bathing Silver Ridge in golden light, and Maggie thought that this moment, right here, was worth every hardship she had endured to reach it. In October, Cole asked Maggie to marry him. He did it without ceremony or elaborate planning, just the two of them sitting on the porch of the ranch house after Sunday dinner, watching his horses graze in the pasture, while Maria hummed to herself in the kitchen. "Marry me," Cole said suddenly, turning to face her. "I don't have a fancy ring yet, and I'm probably doing this all wrong, but I can't wait another day to ask. Marry me, Maggie. Be my wife, my partner, the person I wake up to every morning and fall asleep beside every night. Let me love you and protect you and build a life with you. Say yes." "Yes," Maggie said without hesitation, launching herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock them both off the bench. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Cole caught her, laughing, and spun her around before setting her down and kissing her with a passion that left them both breathless. Maria emerged from the kitchen, took one look at them, and let out a whoop of joy that brought several ranch hands running to see what the commotion was about. "Finally!" Maria exclaimed, pulling them both into fierce hugs. "I was beginning to think you would never ask, boss. Maggie has been waiting patiently, but even patience has limits." "I was not waiting impatiently," Maggie protested, laughing through tears of joy. "Well, maybe a little." The news of their engagement spread through Silver Ridge like wildfire, and reactions were mixed. Many people were genuinely happy for them, pleased to see two good people finding love together. Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears and immediately began planning a celebration. Elizabeth Thornton offered the use of her parlor for a wedding reception and volunteered to help with arrangements. The townspeople who had come to respect and appreciate Maggie's hard work and pleasant manner expressed their congratulations and best wishes. But there were others who viewed the engagement with disapproval or outright hostility. They muttered about Cole lowering himself by marrying a foreigner, about Maggie being a gold digger who had trapped a wealthy rancher, about the moral decay of a society that allowed such unsuitable matches. A few were bold enough to say these things directly to Cole or Maggie, and found themselves receiving icy responses and permanent bans from the general store. "Let them talk," Cole said when Maggie expressed worry about the criticism. "Their opinions mean nothing to me. You are the one I love, the one I choose, and no amount of small-minded prejudice will change that." They set the wedding date for December, wanting to be married before the worst of winter set in. Maggie spent her evenings sewing her wedding dress, simple but beautiful white cotton with lace she had ordered special from San Francisco. Cole worked with the ranch carpenter to add a room onto the ranch house that would serve as Maggie's private sitting room and workspace, somewhere she could retreat when she needed quiet or space to think. "I want you to feel like the ranch is truly your home," Cole explained when he showed her the plans. "Not just my house that you are moving into, but our home that we build together. If there's anything you want changed or added, tell me. This is your place now, too." Maggie was deeply touched by his thoughtfulness, by his constant effort to make her feel valued and included in every decision. They talked about the future of the store, whether she would continue managing it after the wedding or hire someone else to take over. Maggie wanted to keep working, at least for now, enjoying the independence and purpose the job gave her, and Cole supported her decision completely. "It's your choice," he said simply. "If you want to focus on the ranch, that's fine. If you want to keep running the store, that's also fine. If you want to do something else entirely, we will figure it out together. I didn't marry you to clip your wings, Maggie. I married you because I love watching you fly." "We are not married yet," Maggie teased, but she felt warm with happiness at his words. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of preparation and activity. Maria took charge of planning the reception, declaring that she would cook a feast worthy of the occasion. Mrs. Henderson organized the women of the church to decorate the small sanctuary with evergreen boughs and white ribbon. Tommy agreed to play fiddle for dancing afterward, and several of Cole's ranch hands volunteered to provide music as well. Maggie had no family to invite, a fact that caused her some sadness despite the joy of the occasion. Cole seemed to sense her melancholy and held her close one evening as she wept quietly for the parents who would never see her married, never meet the man who had changed her life so completely. "They know," Cole whispered into her hair. "Wherever they are, whatever comes after this life, they know you are loved and safe and happy. That's all any parent really wants for their child. They would be so proud of you, Maggie, as proud as I am every single day." His words comforted her, and when her wedding day finally arrived on a cold, clear December morning with fresh snow covering everything in pristine white, Maggie felt her parents' presence like a blessing, like they were there in spirit if not in body, celebrating this new chapter of her life. She dressed in her simple white gown, with hands that trembled only slightly, arranged her dark hair in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck, and tucked her mother's silver rosary into her bodice where it rested against her heart. Mrs. Henderson fussed over her like a mother hen, adjusting her veil and offering last-minute advice about marriage and men and the importance of patience and communication. The small church was packed with people, far more than Maggie had expected. It seemed that most of Silver Ridge had turned out to witness Cole Brennan's wedding, whether out of genuine affection or simple curiosity. As she walked down the aisle on the arm of Dr. Matthews, who had graciously agreed to give her away, Maggie saw faces both friendly and hostile, but she kept her eyes fixed on Cole, waiting at the altar, tall and handsome in his black suit, his face transformed by a smile of such pure love and joy that it took her breath away. The ceremony was simple and traditional, the words familiar even in English rather than the Spanish she had grown up hearing at weddings in her village. When Cole slipped the gold band onto her finger and spoke his vows in a voice that shook with emotion, Maggie felt tears streaming down her face unchecked. And when the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, and Cole kissed her for the first time as her husband, the church erupted in applause and cheers that drowned out any remaining voices of disapproval. The reception at the Thornton house was everything Maggie could have hoped for, and more. Maria's feast was magnificent, with roasted beef and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, pies and cakes that people talked about for months afterward. Tommy and the other musicians played lively music that had people dancing and laughing, and Cole held Maggie close as they swayed to a slower song, his arms strong and sure around her, his eyes never leaving her face. Happy? He murmured, and she nodded against his chest. Happier than I ever thought possible, she admitted. Sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and discover this was all a dream. Not a dream, Cole promised. This is real, Maggie. We are real, and we have the rest of our lives to build something beautiful together. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued around them, Maggie looked around at the smiling faces of people who had become friends, at Maria beaming with pride, at Mrs. Henderson wiping away happy tears, at the ranch hands who worked for Cole, raising their glasses in toast after toast to the newlyweds. She thought about how far she had come from that desperate morning at the general store when all hope seemed lost, how one man's act of kindness and courage had changed the entire course of her life. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, following her gaze around the crowded room. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Maggie said softly. "For you, for this community, for the chance to build a life here. And I am thinking that Silas Hartwell did me the greatest favor of my life when he refused to serve me that day. If he had not been so cruel, none of this would have happened. I would not have you." Cole laughed and pulled her closer. "I like to think we would have found our way to each other eventually," he said. "But I'm glad we didn't have to wait. I'm glad I got to spend these months falling in love with you, learning everything about you, building a foundation for our marriage that is based on real friendship and respect and partnership." "Me too," Maggie agreed, and kissed him again just because she could, because he was her husband now, because they had a whole lifetime ahead of them to fill with love and laughter and all the beautiful ordinary moments that made a life worth living. They spent their wedding night at the ranch house in the bedroom that Cole had prepared with care, with fresh linens and flowers and a fire burning warm in the hearth. He was gentle and patient with Maggie, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like they had been made to fit together perfectly. Afterward, lying in Cole's arms with her head on his chest and his fingers running gently through her hair, Maggie felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. This was home, this man, this place, this life they were building together. She had found her place in the world at last, and it was more wonderful than anything she had ever dared to imagine. The months that followed their wedding were busy and full of both challenges and joys. Maggie continued managing the store through the winter, making the daily trip into town in the sleigh when snow made the roads impassable for the wagon. Cole worried about her traveling in bad weather, but Maggie insisted she would not abandon her responsibilities just because the conditions were difficult. "I am stronger than I look," she reminded him when he fretted about her safety. "And Tommy comes with me on the worst days. We have not had any problems." Still, Cole was always relieved when she returned home safely each evening, and Maggie found his concern touching rather than suffocating. He was not trying to control her or limit her independence. He simply loved her and wanted her safe, and she understood that completely because she felt the same fierce protectiveness toward him. In February, Maggie discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited to be certain before telling Cole, wanting to give him news that was definite rather than merely hopeful. When she finally revealed her condition over dinner one evening, Cole's face went through such a rapid series of expressions, shock, disbelief, overwhelming joy, that Maggie started laughing. "You're certain?" he asked, taking her hands in his trembling ones. "We're really going to have a baby." "We are really going to have a baby," Maggie confirmed, and found herself swept into his arms and spun around the kitchen, while Maria cheered and banged pots together in celebration. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as spring arrived and Maggie's belly began to swell with their growing child, Cole became even more protective and attentive. He insisted she hire additional help at the store so she would not have to lift heavy items or work such long hours. He made sure she ate properly and rested enough and saw the doctor regularly for checkups. Maggie tolerated his hovering with patient amusement, understanding that it came from love and excitement rather than a belief she was fragile or incapable. And truthfully, she was grateful for the extra help at the store, especially as the summer heat returned and she found herself tiring more easily. In August, she finally agreed to step back from day-to-day management and hire someone to run the store in her place. They found a young widow named Sarah who needed work to support herself and her young son, and Maggie trained her carefully in the business, taking satisfaction in giving another woman the same kind of opportunity that had changed her own life. "You are doing for her what Cole did for you," Maria observed one afternoon as they sat on the ranch porch, Maggie with her swollen feet propped up and a glass of cool water in her hand. Giving her a chance when no one else would, that is a good thing. It feels good, Maggie agreed. Like maybe some of the kindness Cole showed me is rippling outward, making the world a little bit better. Their son was born on a cool September morning, arriving with lusty cries that announced his presence to everyone within earshot. Cole was beside himself with joy, cradling the tiny baby in his large hands with such tenderness that Maggie fell in love with him all over again. They named him Daniel, after Cole's uncle who had raised him, and from the moment he entered the world, little Daniel was the center of their universe. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Maggie had help from Maria and several of the ranch wives who came by with advice and casseroles and offers to watch the baby so she could rest. Cole proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Daniel when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always soothed the baby to sleep. As Daniel grew from infant to toddler and then into a lively little boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, Silver Ridge itself continued to change and grow. More families moved to the area, drawn by the opportunities in ranching and mining. New businesses opened along the main street, and the town gradually took on an air of permanence and prosperity. Maggie's general store, under Sarah's competent management, became one of the most successful businesses in town. Cole's ranch continued to expand, and he became known throughout the territory as a fair and progressive employer who treated his workers well and paid honest wages. Together, they became pillars of the Silver Ridge community, respected and admired by most, if not quite all, of their neighbors. They had 2 more children in the years that followed Daniel's birth. A daughter they named Rose was born 2 years later, with Maggie's dark eyes and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone she met. And 3 years after that came another son, James, who was quiet and thoughtful, where his siblings were loud and boisterous. Maggie sometimes stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching her 3 children play in the yard, while Cole worked with his horses in the nearby corral, and marveled at the life she had built. The frightened young woman who had been turned away from the general store seemed like someone from another lifetime, though it had been less than a decade since that fateful morning. She thought about Silas Hartwell sometimes, wondered what had become of him in San Francisco, whether he had ever regretted his cruelty or learned to see past his prejudices. She thought about the harsh words and hateful looks she had endured, the loneliness and fear of those early days in America. And she realized that while those experiences had been painful, they had also made her stronger, had taught her resilience and compassion, and the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on the top of her head. "Everything," Maggie said, leaning back against his solid warmth. "How far we have come. How lucky we are. How grateful I am that you were brave enough to stand up for a stranger that day." "Best decision I ever made," Cole murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Well, second best. The best decision was asking you to marry me." "I would say yes, all over again," Maggie assured him, turning in his arms to face him. "Every single day, I would say yes." They stood together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, while their children's laughter floated on the evening air, and the ranch bustled with the comfortable sounds of life and work and home. It was not the life Maggie had imagined for herself growing up in her small Mexican village, but it was better than anything she could have dreamed. Years passed, marked by the familiar rhythms of ranch life and small-town living. Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the ranch and took to ranching with natural skill. Rose became a teacher at the new school that opened in Silver Ridge, beloved by her students and respected by their parents. James surprised everyone by showing a talent for music and went east to study at a conservatory, sending letters home full of excitement about his studies and the wider world beyond Montana. Cole's hair turned silver at the temples, and lines appeared around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but he remained strong and vital, still working alongside his ranch hands, still treating everyone with the same fairness and respect that had characterized his entire life. Maggie's own dark hair developed streaks of white, and she gained a few extra pounds that Cole insisted made her more beautiful than ever. But she remained active and engaged in the community, serving on the school board and helping newcomers to Silver Ridge find their footing in the growing town. Sarah, who had managed the general store so successfully, eventually married one of Cole's ranch foremen, and together they bought the business outright, running it for many more years and in turn helping other young women who needed opportunities and second chances. Mrs. Henderson lived to a ripe old age, finally passing peacefully in her sleep at 83, and Maggie wept at her funeral for the woman who had been one of her first friends in America, who had shown her kindness when kindness was rare and precious. The old prejudices faded slowly but steadily as Silver Ridge became more diverse and cosmopolitan, as people realized that character mattered more than origin, that a person's worth was determined by their actions rather than their accent or appearance. It never disappeared entirely. There were always those who clung to old hatreds, but it became less acceptable to voice such opinions publicly, and those who did found themselves increasingly isolated and irrelevant. One autumn afternoon, more than 20 years after Cole had bought the general store and changed Maggie's life forever, they rode together up into the mountains above the ranch, just the two of them, leaving the bustle of ranch life behind for a few hours of peace and solitude. They stopped at a high meadow, with a view that stretched for miles in every direction, and sat together on a fallen log, sharing water from a canteen, and the comfortable silence of two people who had spent decades learning everything about each other. "Do you ever regret it?" Maggie asked finally, breaking the quiet. "Marrying me, I mean. Dealing with all the criticism and disapproval, having a wife who was so different from what people expected?" Cole turned to look at her, his blue eyes still as clear and direct as they had been when he was a young man. "Not for a single second," he said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Maggie. You and our children and the life we built together. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, pay any price, face any criticism. You are worth everything to me. You always have been." "I love you," Maggie said simply, taking his weathered hand in hers. "I have loved you since the moment you stood up for me in that store, and I will love you until I take my last breath." "I love you too," Cole replied, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "You are my heart, Maggie. You always will be." They sat together as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, casting long shadows across the valley below, where their ranch spread out like a promise fulfilled. Maggie thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, the hardships and triumphs, the fear and joy, the devastating losses and unexpected blessings. She thought about the young woman she had been, desperate and alone, turned away from a store for no reason other than where she had been born and how she spoke. And she thought about the man who had seen her worth when others saw only a foreigner, who had risked his reputation and spent his fortune to give her a chance, who had loved her with such fierce devotion that she had bloomed under his care like a flower finally given water and sunlight. It had not always been easy. There had been challenges and setbacks, moments of doubt and difficulty. But through it all, they had faced everything together, partners in the truest sense, building something lasting and beautiful from what had started as a simple act of decency on a hot July morning. The Double B Ranch continued to thrive under their joint management, and it became known throughout Montana Territory as a place where hard work was rewarded and every person was treated with dignity regardless of their background. Cole and Maggie made a point of hiring men and women who needed chances, who had been overlooked or underestimated by others. And time and again these employees proved themselves capable and loyal, grateful for the opportunity to show what they could do. Daniel eventually took over daily operations of the ranch, freeing Cole and Maggie to travel a bit and see more of the country. They visited James in Boston, attended his graduation from the conservatory, and sat in the audience beaming with pride as he performed in his first professional concert. They went to San Francisco and rode the new cable cars, marveling at how much the world had changed since they were young. Rose married a gentleman who taught at the university in Missoula, and they gave Cole and Maggie 3 grandchildren who spent their summers at the ranch, learning to ride and rope and love the land as their grandfather did. Daniel found love with a school teacher from Helena, and they added 4 more grandchildren to the growing family. As Cole and Maggie entered their 60s, they began to slow down, spending more time on the porch in rocking chairs, watching their grandchildren play in the same yard where their own children had grown up. Maria had long since retired, but she remained at the ranch in a small cottage Cole had built for her, and she still showed up regularly to dispense advice and cook special meals for family gatherings. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Silver Ridge held a celebration in their honor. The mayor, who had been a young boy when Cole bought the general store, gave a speech about their contributions to the community, about the example they had set for treating all people with fairness and respect, about the way their love story had become part of local legend. 30 years ago, Cole Brennan did something remarkable, the mayor said to the assembled crowd. He saw injustice and refused to accept it. He saw potential where others saw only difference. He chose love and decency over convenience and conformity. And in doing so, he not only changed Maggie's life, he changed all of our lives. He showed us what kind of community we could be if we just had the courage to stand up for what was right. Maggie sat beside Cole at the head table, tears streaming down her face as speaker after speaker rose to share stories about how the couple had helped them, or inspired them, or simply shown them kindness when they needed it most. Sarah spoke about how Maggie had given her a chance when she was desperate and widowed. Several of the ranch hands, some now retired, talked about Cole's fairness and generosity as an employer. Rose's students, grown into adults now, with children of their own, described how Maggie's involvement in the school had improved education for everyone. When it was finally Cole's turn to speak, he stood slowly, his hand never leaving Maggie's, and looked out at the gathering of friends and neighbors and family. "I don't deserve all this praise," he began, his voice still strong despite his years. "I did what any decent man should do when he sees someone being treated poorly. The real hero of this story has always been Maggie. She is the one who survived impossible odds, who kept her humanity and dignity intact despite facing cruelty and prejudice, who built a successful business and raised amazing children and made this community better just by being part of it. I was just lucky enough to recognize something precious when I saw it, and smart enough to hold on tight once I found it." He turned to Maggie, his eyes shining with emotion. "You have given me the best 30 years of my life, and if I had 30 more, I would spend every one of them loving you and being grateful that you chose me. You are my partner, my best friend, the love of my life, and I thank God every single day that Silas Hartwell was mean enough and stupid enough to refuse you service that morning, because it gave me the opening I needed to finally talk to the beautiful woman I had been admiring from afar for weeks." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, and Maggie rose from her chair to embrace her husband, both of them laughing and crying at the same time, surrounded by the love and respect of an entire community that they had helped to build. More years passed, slower now, marked by quiet mornings and peaceful evenings, by grandchildren's visits and the changing seasons on the ranch. Cole's health began to decline in his late 60s, a weak heart that the doctor said was simply wearing out after so many years of hard work and stress. He bore it with typical stoicism, refusing to let it slow him down too much, still insisting on taking his morning ride and checking on the cattle even when Maggie and Daniel begged him to rest more. "I'll rest when I'm dead," he would say with a grin that reminded Maggie of the younger man who had bought a general store just to make a point. "Until then, I've got living to do." One particularly beautiful spring morning, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows and new calves frolicked in the pastures, Cole convinced Maggie to ride up to their favorite spot in the mountains, the high meadow where they had shared so many important conversations over the years. They sat together on the same fallen log, now weathered and moss-covered, but still solid enough to hold them, and looked out over the valley they had called home for more than 4 decades. "It's been a good life, hasn't it?" Cole said softly, his arm around Maggie's shoulders. "Better than I ever imagined it could be." "The best life," Maggie agreed, leaning into his warmth. She could feel how much thinner he had become, could hear the slight wheeze in his breathing that no amount of medicine seemed to help. "You gave me everything, Cole. Hope, love, family, home, everything that matters." "We gave each other everything," Cole corrected gently. "That's what partnership means, Maggie. We built this life together, brick by brick, day by day. And whatever comes next, whatever time we have left, I want you to know that I have never regretted a single moment. Even the hard times, the struggles and setbacks, they were worth it because I got to face them with you beside me." "Promise me something," Maggie said, her voice breaking slightly. "Promise me you will hold on as long as you can. I am not ready to say goodbye to you yet." "I promise I'll fight with everything I have," Cole said, kissing the top of her head. "But when it's my time, I need you to promise me something too. Promise me you won't stop living. Keep the ranch going. Spend time with the children and grandchildren, maybe even travel some more. Don't let grief swallow you whole. Live, Maggie. Live fully and joyfully, and know that wherever I am, I'll still be loving you. I promise, Maggie whispered, though she could not imagine a life without him in it. They had been partners for so long, had built everything together, that the thought of continuing alone seemed impossible. Cole lasted another 5 years, his heart slowly failing, but his spirit remaining strong until the very end. He died peacefully in his sleep one cold November night, with Maggie lying beside him just as she had for 35 years of marriage. She woke at dawn to find him gone, his face peaceful and young-looking in death, his hand still clasped in hers. The funeral was the largest Silver Ridge had ever seen, with people traveling from 3 states to pay their respects to a man who had touched so many lives with his integrity and kindness. Maggie stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren, accepting condolences from hundreds of mourners, and tried to find comfort in the knowledge that Cole had lived a full and meaningful life, that he had died knowing he was loved and respected, that his legacy would continue through their children and the ranch and the community he had helped to build. But the grief was crushing nonetheless, and for weeks after the funeral, Maggie wandered through the ranch house like a ghost, unable to eat or sleep properly, finding painful reminders of Cole everywhere she looked. It was Maria who finally snapped her out of it, appearing at her door one morning with a basket of fresh bread and a no-nonsense expression. "Enough," the old woman said firmly, pushing past Maggie into the house. "You promised him you would keep living, and keeping a promise to a dead man is even more important than keeping one to a living one. Cole would be heartbroken to see you like this, wasting away, giving up on everything you built together." "I don't know how to live without him," Maggie admitted, sinking into a chair. "He was everything to me." "He was not everything," Maria corrected. "He was important, yes. He was your partner and your love. But you were someone before you met him, and you remain someone now that he is gone. You are a mother and a grandmother. You are a successful businesswoman. You are a valued member of this community. You are Magdalena Torres Brennan, and that means something all on its own, separate from being Cole's wife." The words struck something deep inside Maggie, and she realized that Maria was right. She had become so intertwined with Cole over their decades together that she had almost forgotten the strong, resilient young woman who had walked 3 miles in the heat to buy flour and beans, who had faced down bullies and prejudice, who had built a successful business from nothing. That woman was still inside her, buried under layers of grief, but not gone. And Cole would want her to reclaim that strength, to honor his memory by living fully rather than simply existing. Slowly, painfully, Maggie began to heal. She threw herself into ranch business, working closely with Daniel to ensure Cole's legacy continued. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and making sure they understood the values he had lived by. She volunteered at the school and the church, finding purpose in helping others just as Cole had always done. She visited Cole's grave every week, sitting beside the simple headstone and talking to him about everything happening in her life, in the lives of their children, in the community they had built together. And gradually, over months and then years, the crushing weight of grief lightened into something more bearable, a gentle sadness mixed with gratitude for the extraordinary gift of having loved and been loved so completely. Maggie lived to be 83 years old, active and engaged until the very end. She saw Silver Ridge transform from a rough frontier town into a prosperous modern city. She saw her grandchildren grow up and have children of their own. She saw the Double B Ranch continue to thrive under Daniel's management and later under his sons. And when she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep, one warm July morning, almost exactly 60 years after Cole had bought the general store and changed her life forever, the entire community mourned the loss of a woman who had become a legend in her own right. At her funeral, now attended by great-grandchildren she had doted on, and even a few great-great-grandchildren who were too young to understand what was happening, the current mayor told the story that everyone knew but never tired of hearing. He talked about a young immigrant woman refused service at the general store, about a cowboy who could not stand by and watch injustice happen, about love that bloomed from simple decency and grew into something extraordinary. Maggie and Cole Brennan showed us what love looks like, the mayor concluded. Not the easy romantic love of storybooks, but real love that faces challenges and overcomes them, that builds and creates and perseveres. They showed us that where you come from matters less than who you choose to be, that kindness is never wasted, that standing up for what is right is always worth the cost. Their legacy lives on in this community, in the values we try to uphold, in the way we treat each other. They gave us an example to live up to, and we are all better for having known them. Maggie was buried beside Cole on a hillside overlooking the ranch, and on her headstone, Daniel had inscribed words his father had often spoken. "We built this life together." And they had. From that fateful morning at the general store to the last days of their long lives, they had been partners in the truest sense, building something beautiful and lasting from nothing but courage, love, and unwavering commitment to treating all people with dignity and respect. Their story became part of the history of Silver Ridge, passed down through generations as a reminder of how one act of decency can change everything, how love can flourish in the most unlikely circumstances, how two people who seemed to have nothing in common could build a life together that enriched not just themselves, but an entire community. The general store where it all began was eventually torn down to make way for a larger building, but a historical marker was placed on the site, telling the story of the day Cole Brennan bought a business just to prove a point about basic human decency, and how that decision led to one of the great love stories in Montana history. The Double B Ranch continued for another 3 generations, still run according to the principles Cole and Maggie had established: fair treatment for all employees, quality over quantity, integrity in every transaction, and a commitment to being good stewards of the land and good neighbors to the community. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings, ranch hands swore they could see 2 figures sitting together on the hillside above the main house, holding hands and looking out over the valley, still together even after death, still partners building something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. It was a love story for the ages, born from prejudice and cruelty, but transformed by courage and compassion into something transcendent and eternal. It was the story of Magdalena Torres, who refused to let hardship destroy her spirit, and Cole Brennan, who had the courage to see worth where others saw only difference. It was a story about the power of standing up for what is right, about the transformative nature of love, about building a life and a legacy that mattered. And it all began on a hot July morning in 1883, when a woman was refused service at the general store for her accent, and a cowboy decided to buy the store and hire her instead. From that single moment of kindness grew something extraordinary: a successful business, a thriving ranch, a large and loving family, and a community built on principles of fairness and respect. But more than all of that, from that moment grew a love that sustained 2 people through decades of life's joys and sorrows, a partnership that enriched everyone it touched, and a story that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. It was proof that one person really could make a difference, that love could conquer prejudice, that the right choice made at the right moment could change not just one life, but countless lives spreading outward like ripples in a pond. And in the end, that was the legacy that Maggie and Cole left behind. Not just property or wealth or even family, though those things were important, but the simple, powerful reminder that treating people with kindness and dignity matters, that love is always worth fighting for, and that the most ordinary moment can become extraordinary if you have the courage to do what is right. Their story lived on in the memories of their descendants, in the continued success of the ranch and businesses they had built, in the values they had instilled in their community, and in the hearts of everyone who heard their tale and felt inspired to be a little braver, a little kinder, a little more willing to stand up for what was right regardless of the cost. And so, Magdalena Torres and Cole Brennan, the immigrant and the cowboy who had built something beautiful from nothing, rested together in the Montana soil they had loved, their legacy secure, their love story complete, their promise to each other fulfilled beyond anything they could have imagined on that fateful morning when everything changed. The end of their physical lives was just the beginning of their true immortality, living on in story and song, in the lives they had touched and the community they had built, in the enduring proof that love, courage, and basic human decency will always triumph over hatred, fear, and prejudice in the end. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their happily ever after, earned through decades of devotion and partnership and love that had only grown stronger with each passing year. And anyone who visited Silver Ridge and heard their tale came away with renewed faith in the power of love to transform lives and the importance of having the courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it costs something, even when the whole world seems to be watching and judging. That was the gift that Maggie and Cole gave to everyone who knew them, the reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life for the better, that love is worth any price, and that the most important legacy we can leave is not wealth or property, but the memory of how we treated others and the example we set for those who come after. Their love story was complete, their ending happy, their legacy secure. And somewhere in the Montana mountains they had loved so well. Perhaps their spirits still walked together, holding hands and watching over the land and family they had built, satisfied that they had lived fully, loved deeply, and made the world just a little bit better than they had found it.